Because in round 9, you're kind of getting to the point where Floyd is landing those kind of power punches over and over and over again and landing them in combinations. And Conor's a big guy, a tough guy, he's got a good chin. Floyd Mayweather, obviously, as we've already discussed, isn't the most thunderous puncher, so Conor was absorbing those, but it was really starting to be quite a lot of punishment. And I think the power punches Floyd was able to land, the fact that Conor had no ability to defend them, played a huge part in draining the McGregor stamina. But by round 9, McGregor looked very, very tired for me. He looked like he didn't have full control of his legs due to the fatigue. He wasn't really throwing back in much volume, which was a point Paulie Malignaggi was highlighting correctly in commentary, in my opinion. And from then on, it didn't to me look like Conor would make the final bell. I know there were only 2 or 3 rounds left in the fight, but when you're taking that kind of punishment, 2 or 3 rounds is looking like a lifetime. And I think the referee was correct stepping in round 10 when he did. I applaud him for the stoppage. McGregor went out on his feet. He emerges with some credibility, you'd have to say. He went out on his feet. He wasn't dropped. He went 10 rounds with Floyd Mayweather. He won several rounds of Floyd. You know, I'd give him 3 rounds, but you could certainly make a case. He won a 4th. And he emerges with some credibility, as I say. As for, Floyd, for me, the way this fight went was Floyd's intention. I think Floyd was happy to sacrifice the early rounds. I think he was looking to get Conor to expend some energy before coming into the fight, which he did effectively. I think Floyd was looking to fight a fight where he looked to stop Conor McGregor. We've seen Floyd in countless fights where he was so ahead but really didn't go through the motions. Here, Floyd is going through the motions. He's not being Floyd Mayweather. He's not dancing around on his back foot. He's not using his legs and circling the ring using lateral movement. He's not looking to counterpunch. He's actually looking to come forward and take someone out of there. And that's not the best of Floyd Mayweather. So, I think that what happened in this fight was what Floyd Mayweather wanted to happen in this fight. That Floyd's been inactive for a long time. He's clearly a lot older. If he maybe had another fight at this stage where he had the benefit of recent activity, and when he fought an opponent where he was content to dance and be defensive, I still think we would see a far, far better and more effective Floyd Mayweather that was more reminiscent of the Floyd we saw 2 or 3 years ago. But I don't think there's going to be another Floyd Mayweather fight. This was his last hurrah. This was the last big final payday, and I think he wanted to go out with a knockout. He wanted to go out making a statement in his final fight, and I think he's done that. And he's probably done that in a manner that hasn't brought out the absolute best of him in terms of his style. Some credit for that goes to McGregor, and some credit for that actually goes to Floyd Mayweather. I applaud Floyd for not just deciding to spend the last 3 or 4 rounds using lateral movement and jabbing McGregor. I'm pleased that he wanted to go out and make the statement and stop him. So, fair play to Floyd Mayweather there. I've got to say, if you look at the 2 guys after the fight, there's not a scratch on McGregor. McGregor, we talked about this on the podcast. I was quite of the opinion that I was not clear whatsoever that McGregor's power would translate to boxing. I think from memory, Irish Tom agreed with me on the podcast, and with the benefit of hindsight, that was probably a correct bit of analysis there. McGregor's power really didn't seem to translate to boxing. Maybe it was the gloves. Maybe it was the fact that he didn't look to fully commit to punches, because in MMA, I guess you can throw a punch and then dive into a wrestling move where you've got to keep it at range in boxing. But I do think that comment that Paulie made about the transition of weight as you throw a punch was key. And the way McGregor was throwing that jab and leaning back, and the way he was inaccurate through spells of the fight with his power punching, probably meant that Floyd didn't have to take too much punishment. I know there's a CompuBox stat saying that Conor McGregor landed more punches than Manny Pacquiao, and I'm sure that's correct mathematically and numerically, but you've got to ask yourself, if that's a fair reflection of what actually happened in there. You know, a lot of the jabs that McGregor landed were dubious in terms of quality, and a lot of the punches that Mayweather took was when he decided that maybe he didn't have too much to worry about in terms of the McGregor power, and he was going to run in and actually close down the ring on Conor McGregor. So, yeah, all in all, not a vintage Floyd Mayweather performance. Floyd is not a guy you could confidently pick over the likes of Errol Spence or Keith Thurman based on that performance. As I say, I do think Floyd will put in an improved showing against those guys, because I think he'd fight his normal style, and because I think he'd benefit from recent activity, having been out of the ring for so long. But based on that performance alone, you couldn't pick Floyd as one of the top guys in the sport anymore. He did seem signs of slip heads. He was taking punches that you don't typically see Floyd Mayweather take. But nevertheless, he proved that he had far too much for a guy like Conor McGregor, who, as we all know, hadn't boxed before, which I guess isn't a surprise. As for Conor McGregor, my advice to him would be to retire from boxing completely, and potentially retire from MMA as well. McGregor emerges from this fight with a hell of a lot of credit. I think it was well timed for him. He fought an old Floyd Mayweather, and he did better than expected in terms of winning rounds that Floyd, in my opinion, allowed him to win. I think if he was to fight a guy like Paulie Malignaggi, or to fight one of the top guys at 147, I think there's a risk that the credit he will get for this performance will be lost. You know, if he were to lose to Paulie Malignaggi now, a guy who just lost to Sam Eggington, it really would question, quite what level McGregor actually has in terms of boxing. And I do think there's a risk that a more aggressive fighter like a Spence or a Thurman, with his defensive frailties, would get him out of there a hell of a lot quicker than Mayweather did. Styles make fights, and whilst Mayweather's the supreme boxer out of those names, a guy like Spence closes down the ring much better than Mayweather. He's much bigger than Mayweather, and he probably hits a lot harder than Mayweather. So even though Mayweather is potentially the technical guy out of those names, I really think it wouldn't work out well for McGregor if he was to fight a guy like Errol Spence. So I think he should leave boxing. I think he should go out on this. I don't think he's lost too much in the feet, and I think he should go out on a high. MMA, for me, it's going to be difficult for Conor McGregor. You know, if rumours are to be believed, he made over 100 million for this fight. I'm not an MMA guy, but my understanding is that MMA purses, even Conor McGregor purses, are not comparable to that in any way. And having just had a payday of that amount, having just had a young family, and enjoying the celebrity that he currently enjoys, you've got to wonder if Conor McGregor wants to go back into a sport where he's going to get elbowed in the face and kneed in the jaw and kicked in the head for 2.5%, 5% of what he's just earned in a fight with Floyd Mayweather. You also wonder if miles on the clock may start to catch up on him, and does he want his legacy to be ruined if he were to take further losses in MMA? I know he was defeated by Floyd Mayweather, but perhaps that's a nice way to exit the sport. I saw Dwyer comparing it to the Ronda Rousey situation, and I think Dwyer was spot on there. If Rousey had retired a bit earlier, he'd be known as a legend within MMA, but I think now she's known as someone whose style became a bit outdated and who there was an effective blueprint to beat. And yeah, it'd be nice if that didn't happen to Conor McGregor. As you guys know, I'm not an MMA fan. I can't say I've got huge knowledge of the sport or the history of the sport, but I know quite how big McGregor's profile is. And given that he won't need the money anymore, given that he won't need the celebrity anymore, it just seems like a gamble to get back involved in any form of combat sports when he doesn't need it. If he's got the desire and will and heart to fight on, so be it. But for me, it's at a risk of health, and it's at a risk of legacy. And he's achieved so much already that would be an unnecessary risk to take, in my humble opinion. As for Floyd, I hope Floyd stays retired. I kind of feel like the Floyd era has come to a close now. I don't really want to see him fighting on at 41 or 42. I know he's a very unpopular figure. I know a lot of boxing fans would like nothing more than to see him knocked out. But I've got a lot of time for Floyd Mayweather as a boxer. And for me personally, it'd be disappointing to see him lose to a young up-and-comer. I'd like to see him retire undefeated. Time will catch up with any man eventually. They say Father Time is the only undefeated fighter in boxing, and I agree with that sentiment. You know, as a youngster growing up, I was getting into boxing when Floyd fought Ricky Hatton, and whilst I didn't know the sport as well as I now do at that time, of course there's still a lot of people who know it far better than I do currently, but you know, at the time I remember thinking that Floyd was like an unbeatable fighter. You know, the way he dealt with Ricky Hatton, and you know, to an extent, that air of invincibility has kind of continued with Floyd Mayweather. Right? The way he took care of Canelo Alvarez, the way he took care of Manny Pacquiao. You know, that air of invincibility has been there, even as a man in his mid to late 30s. But the air of invincibility has gone for me, and before that air of invincibility is completely wiped out by an Errol Spence, I would hope Floyd rides off to a strip club somewhere in Las Vegas and is very, very sensible with his money. You know, I hope so. Because wouldn't it be the biggest tragedy ever if Floyd Mayweather ended up penniless? But anyway, I digress. I think the end of the Floyd era is upon us. I think it's kind of been upon us for a while now, and I hope that is the end of it. I think this brings his career to a close, and I don't particularly feel the need to see him fight on. It wasn't a vintage fight. It wasn't the best showing. For me, Floyd still controlled what happened in there. He was still the ring general. He still had the fight developing the way he wanted it to. And he still had far, far, far too much for Conor McGregor, whose power was overrated and whose defence and stamina was lacking in terms of this fight. That's my take on it, guys. Let me know your thoughts. Drop your comments in the section below. If you have enjoyed this, please take the time to hit the thumbs up button. If you're new to the channel or you haven't subscribed before, do subscribe so you can check out all of my other videos. You can follow me on Twitter at Boxing Gossip, and you can add me as a friend on Facebook using the link in the description below. Thanks for tuning in.